Constance Fairweather clutched her daughter's small hand as the stagecoach jolted to a stop in Virginia City's dusty Main Street, the once thriving boomtown now shadowed by empty buildings and broken dreams. Her worn traveling dress spoke of months of careful budgeting, every penny saved for this desperate journey to marry a stranger. 6-year-old Harmony pressed against her mother's side, dark eyes wide with the same gift that had made them outcasts in San Francisco, the ability to see those who had passed beyond the veil. The weight of her carpetbag felt heavier than her fears as Connie surveyed the desolate streets, wondering if she had made the right choice. But with creditors threatening and winter approaching, this mail-order marriage to hotel owner Jeremiah Ashworth represented their only hope for survival. The Grand Sierra Hotel loomed before them like a monument to faded prosperity, its 3 stories of ornate Victorian architecture, somehow both magnificent and melancholy in the afternoon light. Jeremiah Ashworth emerged from the entrance, a tall man with prematurely gray hair and eyes that held depths of sorrow she recognized from her own mirror. His letters had been formal, practical, mentioning his need for a wife to help manage the hotel and care for his establishment. As he approached, removing his hat with careful politeness, Connie noticed how his hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from some inner torment. The introductions were awkward, to strangers bound by desperation and hope, while Harmony hid behind her mother's skirts. "Welcome to the Grand Sierra," he said quietly, his voice carrying an odd mixture of pride and regret. Inside, the hotel's lobby revealed its former grandeur through crystal chandeliers and polished mahogany, though dust motes danced in the slanted sunlight and silence hung heavy as velvet curtains. Jeremiah led them past the front desk, explaining the hotel's layout with the practiced efficiency of a man who had given this tour many times before. But Connie felt something else's presence. Multiple presences, watching from the shadows and empty doorways. Harmony's grip on her hand tightened, and her daughters whispered, "Mama." Their here confirmed what Connie's own heightened senses were screaming. The air itself seemed thick with unfinished business, with souls caught between worlds. As they climbed the carpeted stairs, Connie began to understand why Jeremiah's letters had been so urgent, why he... Before we continue, leave your like, share our story, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. At dinner in the hotel's grand dining room, Connie watched in growing amazement as Jeremiah served 12 complete meals to empty chairs, speaking to invisible guests with the careful courtesy of a devoted host. "Mr. Patterson prefers his coffee black," he murmured, pouring steaming liquid into a cup that sat before vacant air. "And Mrs. Chun always asks for extra bread." Harmony nodded solemnly, pointing to each chair and whispering names to her mother, names of miners who had died 3 years ago in the Silver Crown collapse. The tragedy had claimed 12 souls, and Jeremiah, as the mine's former supervisor, carried the weight of their deaths like chains around his heart. Now Connie understood the terrible truth. Her new husband hadn't been running a hotel at all, but a shrine to the dead, a place where guilt and grief had twisted into an elaborate ritual of service to those who could never truly be served. The revelation shattered her expectations like glass, leaving her to face a choice between fleeing this haunted sanctuary or embracing a destiny she had never imagined. That night, as Harmony slept peacefully in their assigned room, Connie stood at the window watching ghostly figures move through the hotel's corridors, like echoes of purpose and longing. Their forms were translucent but distinct, weathered, miners in work clothes, their faces bearing the dignity of honest labor and the confusion of sudden death. She could feel their restlessness, their desperate need to understand why they remained tethered to this earthly plane. Jeremiah's guilt had indeed bound them here, but there was more. Unfinished letters to loved ones, promises, unkept words, a forgiveness never spoken. Through her window, she saw him in the courtyard below, sitting alone on a bench, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The depth of his self-imposed torment moved her heart, and she began to see that her gift, the ability to communicate with spirits that had made her an outcast, might be exactly what this broken man and these lost souls needed most. Morning brought no relief from the supernatural atmosphere. As Connie discovered Jeremiah in the kitchen preparing an elaborate breakfast for his ghostly guests, his movements mechanical but reverent. "They died because of my decisions," he explained when he noticed her watching, his voice hollow with 3 years of accumulated guilt. "The mine was my responsibility, the safety measures, my oversight. When the mountain took them, I couldn't let them go." The tragic irony was clear. In trying to honor the dead, He had imprisoned both them and himself in an endless cycle of penance. Connie felt the weight of destiny settling on her shoulders like a mantle, understanding that she hadn't come to Virginia City to be merely a wife, but to serve as a bridge between worlds. Her daughter's gentle presence beside her, unafraid of the spirits that surrounded them, gave her the courage to speak the words that would change everything. "Jeremiah, I can help them find peace." Jeremiah's reaction to her revelation was a mixture of desperate hope and protective skepticism, his hands gripping the kitchen counter until his knuckles showed white. "You're not the first to claim such abilities," he said quietly, pain etched in every line of his face. "I've paid charlatans and watched them perform their tricks, while my friends remained trapped." But when Harmony approached him and gently touched his arm, speaking the name Uncle Pete with perfect clarity, his composure crumbled completely. Peter Patterson had been his closest friend among the miners, a man whose nickname was known only to those who had worked alongside him in the depths of the Silver Crown. The child's innocent acknowledgement of Uncle Pete's presence, combined with Connie's steady, compassionate gaze, began to crack the walls of disbelief he had built around his heart. For the first time in 3 years, Jeremiah allowed himself to consider that salvation might be possible. Standing in the hotel's main parlor, surrounded by the watchful presence of 12 restless spirits, Connie made the choice that would define not only her future, but the fate of everyone bound to this place. "I will help them," she declared, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had finally found her true purpose. The decision meant abandoning any pretense of a normal marriage, of safety and conventional respectability for herself and her daughter. Instead, she was choosing to dive headfirst into the supernatural mystery that had consumed Jeremiah's life, risking everything on her untested ability to guide souls to their eternal rest. Harmony slipped her small hand into her mother's, adding her own whispered promise, "We'll help them find their way home." The commitment was absolute and irreversible, transforming Connie from desperate bride into spiritual guardian. From this moment forward, there could be no turning back from the dangerous and sacred work that lay ahead. The first formal séance took place in the hotel's library, where leather-bound volumes and heavy curtains created an atmosphere of scholarly solemnity perfect for communication with the beyond. Connie arranged 12 chairs in a circle, each one bearing the name of a departed miner written on a small placard, while Jeremiah watched with the nervous attention of a man whose entire worldview was about to be challenged. As she began to open her mind to the spiritual realm, the temperature in the room dropped noticeably, and the flame of the oil lamp flickered despite the absence of any breeze. One by one, the spirits manifested more clearly than they had since their deaths, their forms gaining substance and clarity in response to Connie's gentle invitation to communicate. Peter Patterson was the first to speak through her, his familiar voice emerging from Connie's lips with such accuracy that Jeremiah wept openly. "Tell my wife I forgave her," came the message, addressing a guilt that Jeremiah had never known his friend carried. "Tell her the argument before I left meant nothing compared to 30 years of love." Over the following days, Connie established a routine of communion with the departed souls, each session revealing new layers of the tragedy that had bound them to the earthly plane. Some miners had died with unfinished business messages for family members, apologies unspoken, love unexpressed in life's final moments. Others remained because of Jeremiah's overwhelming guilt, his emotional need for their presence preventing their natural progression to whatever lay beyond. During these sessions, Harmony proved to be an invaluable assistant, her childlike perception cutting through the complexity of adult grief to the simple truths that needed acknowledgement. "Mr. Chen wants his grandson to know he's proud," she would announce, or "Mrs. Morrison says her roses will bloom again next spring." Each revelation brought healing not only to the spirits but to Jeremiah himself, as he began to understand that his friends' deaths had been tragic but not his fault. The gradual lightening of the atmospheric pressure in the hotel reflected the slow release of 3 years' accumulated sorrow. The transformation of the hotel from mausoleum to sanctuary became evident as word of Connie's ability spread quietly through Virginia City's small community of survivors and grieving families. Martha Patterson, Peter's widow, was the first to visit, bringing with her the desperate hope of final communion with her beloved husband. Through Connie, Peter delivered his message of forgiveness about their last argument, explaining that her harsh words, born of worry about mine safety, had actually saved 3 other men who heeded her warnings. The widow's tears of relief seemed to lighten the very air in the room, and for the first time, Peter's spirit appeared to grow more translucent, ready to move beyond earthly concerns. Other families followed, children seeking to say goodbye to fathers, wives needing final words of love, parents desperate for assurance that their sons had found peace. Each successful communication strengthened Connie's confidence while simultaneously weakening the bonds that held the spirits to their ghostly existence. By the end of her first month at the Grand Sierra Hotel, Connie had fully embraced her role as mediator between the living and the dead, transforming the establishment into something unprecedented in Virginia City's history. The hotel's rooms, once reserved for ghostly guests, began hosting grieving families who traveled from neighboring towns, seeking closure with their departed loved ones. Jeremiah, his guilt gradually healing through each successful spirit communication, started to see his establishment not as a monument to tragedy, but as a place of genuine healing and hope. The special world Connie now inhabited was one where the veil between life and death grew thin under her guidance, where supernatural abilities were not curses but sacred gifts, and where broken hearts could find mending through connection with the beyond. Harmony thrived in this environment, her natural spiritual sensitivity nurtured rather than suppressed. As she learned to help her mother guide souls toward the light, the hotel's very architecture seemed to respond to this new purpose, its rooms growing warmer, its corridors brighter, as if the building itself approved of this transformation from shrine to sanctuary. The relationship between Connie and Jeremiah deepened beyond their initial arrangement as they worked together to understand each spirit's unique needs and unfinished earthly concerns. Their marriage, born of practical necessity, began to evolve into genuine partnership as they discovered their shared commitment to healing both the living and the dead. Jeremiah's knowledge of each miner's personal history, combined with Connie's spiritual abilities, created a powerful synergy for helping trapped souls find resolution. During quiet evening conversations, he shared stories of the men who had died under his supervision, their dreams, fears, family situations, and the small details that made them individuals rather than mere casualties. Connie listened with the deep attention of someone who understood that every soul had a story worth honoring, while her gentle questions helped Jeremiah process his grief in healthy ways. These intimate exchanges over tea and candlelight began to weave the threads of real affection between two damaged hearts, learning to trust again. Harmony's adjustment to life in the haunted hotel proved remarkably smooth, as her natural spirituality found perfect expression in daily interactions with the ghostly miners. The child treated the departed souls as beloved uncles, chatting with them about their lives, their families, and their hopes for the world they had left behind. Her innocent questions often penetrated to the heart of their unresolved issues more effectively than formal seances, as when she asked Mr. Chen why he looked so sad when talking about his grandson, the resulting revelation that he had died before teaching the boy their family's traditional jade carving techniques led to a successful spirit communication that allowed the grandfather to pass on his knowledge through Connie to the living child. Jeremiah marveled at Harmony's fearless acceptance of the supernatural, recognizing in her the kind of open-hearted courage he had lost in his own childhood. The hotel's atmosphere continued to lighten as the child's laughter echoed through corridors that had known only sorrow for 3 years. The arrival of Harrison Black, editor of the Virginia City Chronicle, introduced an element of skepticism and potential threat to their growing sanctuary for spirit communication. A man of rigid rationality and journalistic cynicism, Harrison had come to investigate reports of fraudulent spiritualist activities at the Grand Sierra Hotel, expecting to expose another charlatan preying on grieving families. His sharp questions and dismissive attitude initially frustrated both Connie and Jeremiah, who feared that negative publicity might destroy their healing work before it could fully develop. However, Connie recognized in Harrison's aggressive skepticism the pain of someone who had lost faith in anything beyond the material world, and she sensed that his journalistic crusade against spiritualists stemmed from personal tragedy rather than mere professional duty. When Harmony approached the stern newspaperman and quietly asked about his sad lady friend who stands beside him, Harrison's composure shattered completely. The child's reference to his deceased fiancée, dead 5 years from consumption, opened a crack in his emotional armor that Connie knew she must approach with infinite care. During Harrison's reluctant stay at the hotel, Connie worked carefully to demonstrate the genuine nature of her abilities, while respecting his intellectual need for evidence rather than faith. She allowed him to observe multiple seances without participating, noting his scientific attempts to detect fraud through careful observation of body language, ventriloquism, and other common deception techniques. The breakthrough came when Samuel Morrison, one of the trapped miners, provided specific details about Harrison's fiancée, Elizabeth, that no living person could have known private jokes they shared, the exact words of her final letter, and her regret about harsh words spoken during their last argument. Harrison's emotional walls crumbled as Elizabeth's spirit, speaking through Connie, delivered the forgiveness he had sought for years through alcohol and workaholism. His tears of recognition marked not only personal healing, but the conversion of a potential enemy into a powerful ally. The newspaperman's analytical mind, once spent on exposing fraud, now turned to documenting the miraculous healing taking place at the Grand Sierra Hotel. The establishment of trust between all the adults created a stable foundation for their expanded mission of spiritual healing and community service. Jeremiah's practical management skills, Connie's mediumship abilities, Harrison's communication talents, and even Harmony's innocent wisdom combined into an effective team for helping both the living and the dead find peace. The hotel's daily routine now included scheduled seances for visiting families, careful documentation of spirit communications for Harrison's sympathetic articles, and Jeremiah's gradual emotional healing, as each successful case proved his friends were not imprisoned by his guilt but freed by his love. The partnership extended beyond professional cooperation into genuine family bonds, as Harrison found himself staying longer each week, helping with correspondence and serving as an unofficial spokesman for their unusual work. Even the hotel's atmosphere reflected this growing harmony, with the oppressive feeling of during a particularly moving seance in late November, when the first winter snow began dusting Virginia City's empty lots and abandoned mine shafts. Connie experienced a profound moment of spiritual and emotional commitment that sealed her destiny to this place and these people, as she guided the spirit of Thomas Brady toward final peace, helping him deliver forgiveness to the son who blamed himself for his father's mine accident. She felt the full weight and privilege of her calling settle into her heart like warm honey. This work was not just about helping individual souls cross over, but about healing the wounded heart of an entire community devastated by industrial tragedy and economic collapse. Looking around the circle at Jeremiah's grateful tears, Harrison's careful notes, and Harmony's serene acceptance of the miraculous, Connie understood that she had found her true home and purpose at last. The commitment was total and joyful, transforming her from reluctant male bride into the spiritual heart of a healing ministry that would serve both Virginia City and visitors from far beyond its borders. The successful expansion of their spiritual healing work attracted attention from beyond Virginia City, bringing both grateful families and unwanted scrutiny from religious and civic authorities. Letters arrived weekly from people in neighboring states who had heard about the Grand Sierra Hotel's miraculous communications with the dead, pleading for help in contacting their own departed loved ones. Connie found herself scheduling appointments months in advance, while Jeremiah expanded the hotel's capacity to accommodate the steady stream of visitors seeking supernatural healing. However, their growing reputation also drew criticism from conventional religious leaders who declared their work heretical, and from civic officials who worried about the town's reputation being associated with spiritualist practices. The Virginia City Council received formal complaints from several sources, including mining company executives who feared that investigations into the Silver Crown disaster might reveal corporate negligence. The pressure began to mount as autumn gave way to winter, with anonymous threats appearing in their mail and hostile editorials published in competing newspapers. Harrison's investigative skills uncovered the organized opposition forming against their work, led by Reverend Marcus Thornfield of Virginia City's most prominent church, and backed financially by mining interests that feared public scrutiny of industrial safety practices. Through careful research, Harrison discovered that Reverend Thornfield had personal reasons for opposing spiritualism. His own wife had consulted mediums after their child's death, eventually leaving him for a spiritualist commune in California. The mining company's opposition was more practical. Any investigation into the circumstances of the Silver Crown disaster might reveal safety violations that could result in costly lawsuits from victims' families. These powerful enemies began coordinating their efforts, using Thornfield's religious authority to provide moral cover for the mining company's economic concerns. Harrison's articles in the Chronicle, while supportive of the hotel's work, could not counter the influence of wealthy opponents who had significant leverage over local businesses and political figures. The battle lines were clearly drawn, with forces far more powerful than a small-town newspaper editor aligned against their healing ministry. The first direct attack came through the legal system, as county officials served Jeremiah with citations for operating a business without proper permits and violating health codes by conducting seances in areas designated for food service. The bureaucratic harassment was clearly coordinated, with inspectors arriving daily to find new violations in a hotel that had operated without complaint for 3 years. More seriously, Connie found herself facing accusations of fraud from the state attorney general's office, which had received formal complaints alleging that she was bilking grieving families out of money through fake spiritual communications. Although their services were provided free of charge, the accusations threatened to destroy her reputation and possibly result in criminal charges. Jeremiah hired a lawyer with their limited savings, but the legal expert warned that their unconventional work left them vulnerable to prosecution under various statutes governing fraud, public health, and business operation. The stress of constant legal threats began to wear on all of them, with Harmony asking why the angry people wanted to stop them from helping the sad spirits find their way home. During this period of mounting pressure, Connie discovered that her spiritual abilities were becoming stronger and more precise, as if the opposition was forcing her to develop greater focus and power. The trapped minor spirits began manifesting more clearly during seance, providing increasingly detailed information about their earthly lives and the circumstances of their deaths that even skeptics found difficult to dismiss. Through these enhanced communications, disturbing details about the Silver Crown mine disaster began to emerge. Safety warnings ignored, cost-cutting measures that eliminated crucial support structures, and company officials who knew about dangerous conditions but chose profits over worker protection. The spirit's testimony, meticulously documented by Harrison, painted a picture of criminal negligence that extended far beyond Jeremiah's imagined guilt. However, this knowledge also made their work more dangerous, as powerful interests realized that the ghostly witnesses could potentially destroy careers and cost millions in legal damages. The stakes of their spiritual mission had escalated beyond individual healing to potential criminal justice and corporate accountability. The winter holidays brought both joy and increased danger, as Christmas Eve saw their most successful seance yet, with 8 of the 12 trapped spirits finally achieving the peace necessary to cross over to the afterlife. The hotel's main parlor filled with an almost visible golden light as Peter Patterson, Thomas Brady, Samuel Morrison, and 5 others spoke their final words to loved ones through Connie's mediumship, then faded gently into whatever realm awaited them beyond earthly concerns. Jeremiah wept with gratitude and relief, understanding at last that his friends had forgiven him long before he learned to forgive himself, while Harrison documented everything with photographs and detailed notes that would preserve the miraculous events for history. However, their celebration was short, as Christmas morning brought news that Reverend Thornfield had filed a formal petition with the territorial governor requesting a state investigation into occult practices and public health violations. At the Grand Sierra Hotel, the petition, backed by affidavits from mining company executives and several disgruntled former hotel guests, represented the most serious threat yet to their work and their freedom. The arrival of territorial investigators in early January confirmed that their enemies had succeeded in escalating the conflict to the highest levels of government authority. 3 stern officials, accompanied by a physician and a minister, came to conduct formal interviews with everyone involved in the hotel's operations and to witness an actual seance for evidence of fraud or genuine supernatural phenomena. The investigation was thorough and skeptical, with the officials clearly expecting to find evidence of deliberate deception rather than authentic spirit communication. Connie submitted to their questioning with dignified patience, while Jeremiah provided detailed financial records proving that no money had been charged for spiritual services and that the hotel was barely breaking even despite its unique activities. Harrison's carefully documented records of seances, including photographic evidence and testimony from dozens of satisfied families, provided the most compelling defense of their work's legitimacy. However, the investigators remained warning that their final report would determine whether criminal charges would be filed and whether the hotel would be allowed to continue operating. The crisis reached its peak when federal marshals arrived with a warrant for Connie's arrest on charges of mail fraud, based on letters she had written to families describing successful spirit communications that prosecutors claimed were false and designed to extract money from grieving victims. Despite the fact that no money had been exchanged, the federal charges carried serious penalties, including years in prison and permanent separation from Harmony, who would become a ward of the state if her mother were convicted. The arrest warrant also included seizure of the hotel's assets as potential proceeds from criminal activity, threatening to destroy everything they had built over the past months. As the marshals placed handcuffs on Connie's wrists while Harmony sobbed in Jeremiah's arms, the remaining 4 trapped spirits manifested with unprecedented clarity, their anguished wails echoing through the hotel like a supernatural protest against injustice. The arrest represented not only a personal catastrophe for Connie and her family, but a potential end to the healing work that had brought peace to so many souls and families, standing on the threshold of complete failure, with federal law arrayed against them and powerful enemies celebrating their apparent victory. The small group of believers faced their darkest hour. During the 3 days Connie spent in the territorial jail awaiting her federal hearing, Jeremiah and Harrison worked frantically to gather evidence that would prove her innocence and the authenticity of their spiritual work. Their breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Martha Patterson, Peter's widow, had preserved every letter her husband had written from the mine, including his final message describing specific safety concerns and naming company officials who had ignored workers' warnings about unstable tunnel conditions. When Harrison compared these historical documents with the information Peter's spirit had provided through Connie's mediumship, the correlation was perfect, down to technical details about mining procedures that no outsider could have known. Even more importantly, Peter's spirit had revealed the location of a hidden cache of documents that he had buried near the mine entrance the night before the disaster, convinced that the company would destroy evidence of their negligence. The discovery of these papers, containing detailed reports of safety violations and corporate correspondence discussing the risks, provided concrete proof that the spirit's testimony was not only genuine but crucial to exposing a criminal conspiracy that had resulted in 12 preventable deaths. The hidden documents revealed a pattern of corporate misconduct that extended far beyond simple negligence to deliberate endangerment of workers' lives in pursuit of increased profits. Letters between mining company executives discussed the high cost of safety improvements and the acceptability of calculated risks that treated workers' lives as expendable resources in the drive for shareholder returns. Most damning of all was a telegram from the company's head engineer warning that the Silver Crown mine's support structures were inadequate and that a collapse was inevitable. Within weeks, unless expensive, reinforcements were installed immediately. The company's response had been to suppress the report and fire the engineer rather than spend money on worker safety. Harrison's front-page articles in the Chronicle, supported by photographic evidence of the buried documents and testimony from surviving miners who confirmed their authenticity, created a sensation that reached newspapers throughout the Western Territories. The revelation transformed public perception of the hotel's spiritual work from suspected fraud to heroic whistle, with the ghostly miners now viewed as martyrs seeking justice rather than mere supernatural curiosities. The shift in public opinion brought powerful new allies to their cause, including territorial legislators who demanded criminal investigations into the mining company's conduct and federal officials who began questioning whether prosecuting Connie served justice or merely protected corporate interests. Senator William Stewart of Nevada, himself a former miner and advocate for workers' safety, publicly declared that the spirits of the Silver Crown disaster have accomplished more for mining safety in death than our laws managed in life. His intervention, with federal prosecutors, combined with overwhelming evidence of the spiritual testimony's accuracy, resulted in all charges against Connie being dropped with a formal apology from the U.S. Attorney's Office. More importantly, the territorial government announced a comprehensive investigation into mining safety practices throughout Nevada, with the Silver Crown documents serving as the foundation for new legislation protecting workers' rights and holding corporations accountable for safety violations. The hotel's reputation was not only restored but elevated, with families traveling from across the West seeking both spiritual healing and justice for their own lost loved ones. The vindication brought unexpected challenges as well as triumph, as the Grand Sierra Hotel found itself overwhelmed with visitors seeking spiritual services, legal assistance, and simply hoping to be part of a place where miraculous justice had been achieved. Connie's abilities, strengthened by the intense spiritual activity of recent months, now allowed her to facilitate communications with spirits far beyond the original 12 miners, opening the hotel to souls from across the region who had unfinished business with the living world. Jeremiah hired additional staff and expanded the hotel's facilities to accommodate the demand, while Harrison established a regular publication documenting the ongoing spiritual communications and their impact on families throughout the territory. However, the intensity of constant contact with the spirit world was taking a toll on Connie's physical health, and she began experiencing episodes of exhaustion and disorientation as the boundary between the living and dead became increasingly permeable. The success they had fought so hard to achieve was threatening to consume the very person who made it possible. The solution to their overwhelming success came from an unexpected ally, Dr. Elizabeth Garrett, a pioneering female physician who had studied spiritual phenomena in European universities and traveled to Virginia City specifically to examine Connie's mediumship abilities. Unlike the skeptical investigators who had preceded her, Dr. Garrett approached the supernatural communications with scientific curiosity rather than predetermined conclusions, conducting careful measurements of electromagnetic fields, temperature variations, and other physical phenomena during her findings, published in prestigious medical journals, provided the first scientific validation of genuine psychic phenomena, establishing protocols that allowed Connie to work more efficiently while protecting her health from spiritual overexertion. More importantly, Dr. Garrett's medical expertise revealed that Connie's exhaustion stemmed not from the spiritual communications themselves but from her failure to maintain proper boundaries between her consciousness and the spirit realm. With proper training and protective techniques, she could continue her healing work indefinitely without risking her own well-being. The arrival of this knowledgeable ally marked a turning point that would allow their mission to expand beyond crisis management into a sustainable institution for spiritual healing and supernatural justice. The mining company's final desperate attempt to destroy their work came through a coordinated campaign of violence and intimidation that escalated far beyond legal harassment into direct physical threats against everyone associated with the hotel. Anonymous letters warned that accidents might befall those who continued defaming honest businessmen with ghost stories, while mysterious fires began breaking out in buildings owned by people who had publicly supported the hotel's work. The most serious incident occurred when someone sabotaged the hotel's gas lines, creating a leak that could have resulted in an explosion, killing everyone in the building if not for Harmony's supernatural sensitivity detecting the bad smell that the scary man left. Harrison investigation revealed that the saboteur was a hired operative working for a coalition of mining interests throughout the territory, all of whom feared that the Silver Crown revelations would inspire similar investigations into their own safety practices. The realization that powerful corporate interests were willing to commit murder to protect their profits cast a dark shadow over their recent victories and forced everyone involved to confront the true stakes of their spiritual justice. Worked out, the crisis deepened when Jeremiah received an ultimatum from the mining company's lawyers: cease all spiritual activities immediately, or face a lawsuit that would not only bankrupt the hotel but also result in criminal charges against everyone involved in what they termed a conspiracy to defame legitimate businesses through fraudulent supernatural claims. The legal threat was backed by affidavits from supposed expert witnesses who claimed to have detected evidence of fraud in the hotel's seances, along with financial pressure applied to the hotel's suppliers, bank, and local government officials. Several longtime supporters, including some families who had found peace through Connie's mediumship, began distancing themselves from the hotel as the economic and social pressure mounted throughout Virginia City. Even Harrison's newspaper faced advertising boycotts and threats to its printing supplies, forcing him to consider whether continuing his supportive coverage might destroy his business and livelihood. The weight of responsibility for other people's welfare began crushing Jeremiah's spirit, as he saw his attempt to honor his dead friends potentially destroying the lives of his new family and allies. The situation reached a breaking point during a town hall meeting where Reverend Thornfield and mining company representatives demanded that the county government shut down the hotel's spiritual activities as a threat to public order and economic stability. The meeting drew hundreds of people from throughout the region, with supporters and opponents of the hotel's work filling the building to capacity, while tensions ran high between those seeking spiritual justice and those fearing economic disruption. When Connie rose to defend their work, speaking with quiet dignity about the healing they had brought to countless families and the justice they had delivered for the Silver Crown victims, the room erupted into competing chants of support and condemnation. The chaos reached dangerous levels when someone threw a bottle at the podium, missing Connie but striking an elderly woman who had come to thank her for helping communicate with her deceased son. The violence shocked even the hotel's opponents, but it also demonstrated how deeply the community had become divided over issues that transcended simple spiritualism to encompass fundamental questions about justice, truth, and the rights of working people against corporate power. That night, as snow fell heavily over Virginia City, and the hotel sat under virtual siege from both supporters and opponents gathering in the streets, the 4 remaining trapped spirits manifested with unprecedented clarity and urgency, warning that a final attempt to destroy the hotel was imminent. Through Connie's mediumship, they revealed that explosives had been placed in the hotel's basement by the same saboteur who had tampered with the gas lines, set to detonate at midnight, when the building would be occupied by several families staying for scheduled seances the following morning. The ghostly miner's warning came with a terrible choice: flee immediately to save everyone's lives, or attempt to defuse the explosives and risk death in order to preserve the sanctuary that had become so important to hundreds of people seeking healing and justice. As the clock approached 11 p.m. and the weight of the decision pressed down on them, Connie experienced her greatest test of faith and courage, forced to choose between safety and service while knowing that either choice would forever change the course of their lives. In that moment of ultimate crisis, surrounded by the spirits of men who had died for corporate greed, and faced with the possibility of joining them, she found within herself a strength and determination that transformed her from reluctant medium into true spiritual warrior, ready to risk everything to protect the sacred work that had become her destiny. With only an hour left before the planned explosion, Connie worked urgently with Jeremiah, Harrison, and Dr. Garrett to locate the bombs hidden in the hotel's basement. Guided by the spirits of the trapped miners, Chun, Martinez, O'Brien, and young Billy, she braved the maze of storage rooms. The ghosts, growing stronger as danger mounted, lent their underground knowledge while Dr. Garrett tracked electrical signals and Harmony translated spirit warnings. Together, they managed to find and disarm 2 sophisticated devices, though doing so nearly overwhelmed Connie as she allowed the spirits to guide her hands. The last bomb was buried in the hotel's support column, threatening collapse if handled incorrectly. As midnight neared, dozens of other restless souls from Virginia City appeared, their presence both empowering and destabilizing. Connie, filled with their energy and prayers from above, attempted the final defusal. With seconds remaining, and guided by the spirit's collective will, she cut the last wire, saving the building. The miners then crossed into the afterlife in peace, leaving behind a hotel no longer cursed but blessed as a monument to love, courage, and justice. The failed sabotage unraveled a vast corporate conspiracy, leading to arrests of company executives and reforms in worker safety. The Grand Sierra Hotel became a beacon of spiritual healing and social justice, attracting scholars, grieving families, and government officials. Over the years, Connie's mediumship grew into a national movement, transforming attitudes towards spiritualism and proving that the supernatural could bring healing and justice. What began as Connie's desperate marriage of survival became a legacy of love, strength, and service that bridged the worlds of the living and the dead.